Well, I guess, David, to kind of start out with, were you familiar with Dr. Hynek's work from like Close Encounters and the later stuff, or did you get a hold of this from the very beginning of like hearing about the Project Blue Book and then got on board? Like, how did this start?
Sure. I mean, I've always had a lifelong interest in the question of are we alone in the universe? And I don't think you can look at that question seriously without exploring the UFO issue. And my entire life, I would, and my interest actually started more in the present. I would read the books that were coming out now. Like I read Communion as a kid in the 80s and would read all the, abduction books and freak myself out and stuff like that and watch all the documentaries on Fox of best UFOs caught on tape. And I was just always obsessed with this subject matter. And then as time went on, I wanted to look into the history of this and really America's very strange and mysterious history with this subject matter. And of course, the pinnacle of that is Project Blue Book, and which really was this U.S. Air Force government investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena happening in our skies. And what intrigued me most about that was really the fact that the chief scientific advisor assigned to go out there and explain what people were seeing, who was a complete UFO skeptic at the start and an astrophysicist trained to identify, celestial objects, became a believer and completely shifted sides and became convinced of two things. I mean, really became convinced not only that do UFOs represent some sort of intelligence in our skies that we have yet to understand, but that he became convinced that the U.S. government is aware of that fact, and Project Blue Book itself was a disinformation campaign used to control public perception and hide the truth about UFOs, which is why he dedicated his life to it. So that arc and that journey was just fascinating to me and really opened my eyes up to just how big this story is and how pervasive and long lasting it has been. I mean, since at least the modern era of UFOs beginning in 1947. So.
When did y'all get the idea to do it kind of like Mad Men style, where you would go from case to case or year to year?
So one night having dinner with my wife, and I had been mainly working in movies at the time, and I was very familiar with Dr. Alan Hynek, and I'd seen Close Encounters and had seen all the documentaries on him and about UFO history. I still have the napkin where I wrote down this idea of sort of like real life X-Files meets Mad Men, set in the time of Mad Men, and we both had this eureka moment. And I really credit my wife being like, "You have to do this. You have to do this." And I told my manager and my agent at the time, and and I put together just a document of sort of like, here's what I'm thinking, and they flipped for it too. And because it has this engine in that every week we look at a real life UFO case from that era that Project Blue Book really investigated through the eyes of these of two very different characters driven by two very different forces. And of course we have like a ton of other storylines going on as well, but that engine to just drive the show week in and week out. For me, it was just that moment of, oh my God, this, and frankly, it was a show that I would want to watch. And I think that's what drove me too, is like, I will be so insanely like jealous if I don't get to be involved in this somehow, that I just like had to jump all over it, and it just like consumed me,
So I'm curious for Laura and Michael, when you guys got the script and you're reading your characters, or what you hope are your characters, what drew you to that? Because I mean, y'all both have kind of fiction background on TV, but you have shows that are sort of connected. I mean, Man in the High Castle and The Oath is something that's about secret societies and stuff. But what drew you to, I mean, real life Mimi, and is Michael a composite of a group of guys, or?
I'll let him answer that one.
Yeah, so initially Captain Michael Quinn was called Edward J. Ruppelt, which is one of the most esteemed heads of Project Blue Book, and was during the time, but he's kind of an amalgamation of him and several other heads, I suppose. For me, it's always, the main interest obviously is the subject matter, which is incredible, and it's one of my favorite things as an actor is diving into the history. I mean, I trained classically in England, and one of my favorite things that drew me to acting in general was the historical aspect. So, in a way, this is my first real chance in TV to do a historical drama. So that was very exciting, and obviously the character aspects are what draws me the most. And reading the script, I was very excited to get into the nuances of the Air Force and what it's like to be in that world, in that time, and the constraints that you have as well when you're in that kind of position. The powers above putting pressure on you, keeping your mouth shut, and Quinn gets to explore, or I get to explore a lot of those concepts as Quinn. It's a very, very layered character, so that drew me to it a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I literally and honestly fell in love with the script written by this lovely man, and I'm not just saying that to suck up. The night that I was reading and debating whether I was going to audition for it or not, it was a very special script. And I loved that it was based on these real life cases that were classified at one point. I love that real historical time period. And I loved Mimi. I mean, I fell in love with her character and her journey. In many ways, her journey is sort of about finding her inner strength, I guess you could say, as she is challenged by what Project Blue Book brings about to her family. I mean, it's not an easy time when, you know, the U.S. Air Force is hiring your husband to, first of all, investigate UFOs, and it's all top secret, even from you. So Mimi starts to wonder how much of a threat Project Blue Book really will be on her family. And I was really fascinated by that journey.
So it begs the question, David, with having these real life cases and creating the episodes, what was tougher, going through all that information of the actual sightings and the cases, or structuring the lives of these characters? And like, we're going to get to see like their kids grow up and in this whole experience. Which was more difficult for you to capture, I guess, as a writer?
I think they both present challenges. I mean, you know, for just in first with the cases, I think we had to understand that, okay, you know, we're not doing a documentary on Project Blue Book. Those already exist. We are dramatizing it, but rooting it in real life cases. So there are, you know, occasions where we will admit that yes, we have changed the chronology of a case, like, you know, this case actually technically happened before this other case, or those kinds of things. But that we felt, but again, each one self-contained, rooted in fact, you know. So there were those challenges of sort of figuring out what was the trajectory of where we were headed. I was fortunate that even from the very beginning, I put together a series Bible, which is essentially sort of a roadmap for where we would be headed by the end of the first season, and that really largely stayed where we go, which was really great, because it's great to kind of know where we're headed in a very broad way. In terms of the character dynamics, you know, listen, and we also, I worked with a wonderful showrunner named Sean Jablonski, who'd done this a zillion times. We had an incredible, very small but fantastic writing staff of you know, veterans in television, and a wonderful staff writer as well. We just wanted to make sure that, yes, you know, conceptually we're going to hook people in with the big idea of the show, but what people tune into TV for is the characters, right? Like that, they want to check in with their friends every week and see what's happening, right? So that became incredibly important to make sure that, like, so we would spend days where we would just be like, we're just going to focus on like Mimi and Mimi's character, and what do we want to do with her in this episode. And we always try to find thematic connections in every episode. Okay, like the case is about this. How can we explore something that either is counterpoint to that, or mirroring that in the lives of these people? And that I think is and I really credit Sean Jablonski with also thinking that way as well. And it really helps you understand where naturally these characters should go as the story progresses, you know, as we twist and turn and do all the, like, you know, those major moments plot-wise that I know we want to hit as well. So
what's it like working off Aiden? You guys are basically his two, not lovers, but basically, you know what I mean? Like, to some extent.
Yeah, for sure.
You both share so much time with him. How much fun was it working off of him?
Well, you say we're not lovers yet. I mean, there's room for anything in season 2.
Air Force husband, then.
Yeah, right. There's something in that. Yeah.
The work wife.
He's married to his work.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the question? No, Aiden, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever spent so much time with another man you know, for an extended like 6-month period. And luckily we got on immediately. We both brought a lot to the table from different realms, and we're always sharing stuff with each other. He's got a real humble and intensely, what's the word I'm looking for? He's got a great work ethic. He comes in prepared with ideas. We were always talking to each other during the scenes about things that were working, what weren't, asking each other questions, and it was just literally a great duo, great pairing up. So, you know, testament to everybody who helped to make that happen. I feel like we made something special, you know, with that relationship, especially.
And then the real wife.
Yes, and then the real story. No, I mean, I second what you say 100%. I mean, Aiden is a really genuinely lovely man who's very generous as an actor, and I just loved watching him work and also being a part of our world together. I felt like he's a very honest actor, and he would find really moments that, I don't know, like certain things that were just so honest that you could tell sort of also came from him, but it was perfect. I loved him. And just also watching as the Hynek home starts to become a little unhinged. I won't get within that, but just watching his journey and seeing how that progresses, you go, wow, yeah, that's why you're Aidan Gillen. You do a fantastic job. But we really do have so many wonderful actors, including Ksenia Solo, who plays Susie, Marco Heine,
who play our generals.
Everybody is.
Yeah. Let me say that really quick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's an ensemble piece at the end of the day, and I feel like the fact that all these stars have aligned for this and the support that we have as a Blue Book community is really one of the biggest selling pitches of the show. I don't know, whatever the word is. Here, take this away from me.
We like each other.
Yeah, the cast. I mean, no, it's true.
Somehow.
The cast really does get along. We have a great time, on and off the set. There are all of our series regulars are fantastic people and bring their A game, and I think really care about what they're doing with this show and care about the subject matter and know that it's kind of a delicate, thing that you have to get just right. We want it to feel grounded, but we want the mystery and intrigue to be there. I'm blown away. I mean, the cast, beginning with Aiden and all the way down, and obviously these guys, of course, they bring it to life. You know what I mean? Without great cast, it's just wonderful words on the page, but that's never where we want it to go. We want it to just be, we want it to really come to life as best as we can, and that can't happen without a wonderful cast.
So this next question, you may not be able to answer it fully because you may not be able to reveal stuff that you don't want to reveal, but sure. I'm curious, with the landmark elements that are in like the Majestic 12 file or the Condon report, or these like huge elements in Project Blue Book that are still not unanswered or yes. left in the what the hell is going on type things. How do you guys tackle that and still somehow keep it, the drama of the show going as well around that?
Yeah, well, with regards to the Majestic 12, I had the fortune to sit down with the last living director of Project Blue Book, who is in his late 90s. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend. He was a Tuskegee airman in World War II, and he's still alive. Fantastic guy, fascinating guy. One of the most incredible things I learned, there's two things I learned about him. One, I definitely asked about the Majestic 12, because the Majestic 12 is an element that we explore on the show. I don't think that's a spoiler. That's sort of in the trailer. I asked him about the reality of that program, and and about those documents, and he had heard rumblings about such a group when he was director of Project Blue Book, so he authenticated the idea that President Truman did assemble that group in 1947 to deal with the UFO issue. Number two, I asked him if you had found evidence of sort of an intelligence that we have yet to understand, whether that be extraterrestrial or whatever the nature of UFOs turns out to be, would you inform the American public? And he said no. So those two things. Now he didn't. That's not admitting that. But it's pretty. That blew me away. Both the fact that the Majestic 12, there was already rumblings in his era, and we're talking about the late 50s for him. is incredible. And we, I try to take very seriously all the sort of smoking gun evidence, the Twining memo, the estimate of the situation, these documents that show up in UFO history that defy, that are real government documents that are determining that these things are of interplanetary origin, right? I mean, that was the estimate of the situation itself. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think as pulling as much as we can from real life history and sort of the incredible documents that existed in that era only helps authenticate and show that like there's really something to this, and what is the nature of this is still unknown, and it's one of the great mysteries of our time.
One thing I noticed in the first episode, I loved the set design, the way you guys capture so many different. You could recreate what you guys have in notes, or you could give us something new. Like, what was it like working in Vancouver and giving us this beautiful world? You recreate the 50s.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think these guys, who had to live in these sets every day, I think can answer even better. I'll just say that our production designer. Yeah. You didn't sleep at the Hynek home? Yeah. Our production designer, this guy named Ross Dempster, was a true talent, has done so much TV, and we fell in love with his stuff. I mean, it captured the perfect, sense of nostalgia, but not being kind of sort of cheesy or corny the way sometimes 1950s stuff can be, because he knew the show is super dark and it's a noir and it's a mystery show, and it's a very fine line to walk, but we wanted to feel grounded. Even the kind of MJ12 chamber room, as we call it, like, it had to pop, but it also had to feel real. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say the Hynek home. You never know what to expect when you're going to go to your character's house, right? You really don't. So I kind of held my breath. I remember going, okay, let's see what they brought. But oh my God, it felt like a home. Like the moment we walked in, it is just so beautiful and warm, and the way light plays in this house, it can depict the mood so easily in terms of whether we want that warmth or whether we want it to fall into the darkness. And just the detail of every single little prop in there, it was so well thought out. It was brilliant, I thought.
Yeah, it's all about the details. I mean, when I'm friends for her, the Hynek home, for me, it's the office of Project Blue Book, and that's where I spend a lot of time. And I'm sitting at the desk, all the newspaper clippings, very specifically, of the time and everything, obviously, but the incredibly detailed props and everything to do with that, as well as the detail in the performances. And I feel like everything is very nuanced, and you do feel like you're transported into that time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've got to ask, do you guys believe in UFOs?
Wow. I guess I'll start because my answer is pretty obvious. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Yes. I mean, I think it is undeniable that there are things flying in our skies that we have yet to understand. I really do think that, you have your head in the sand if you are not at least willing to accept that. Now, whether these objects move intelligently, that really I think you have to look at through the research. My argument would be that absolutely we are dealing with an intelligence in our skies that we have yet to understand. Where I fall on it is sort of the way Hynek fell on it, in that Hynek had the real Dr. Alan Hynek in his books had many theories about the potentials of what we might be dealing with. Whether are we dealing? The extraterrestrial hypothesis is of course a very popular hypothesis, but he felt that it's just as possible that these were interdimensional entities of some sort from like a higher reality plane, kind of seeping into our reality. He thought it was possible that we may be being visited by our future selves, and that UFOs represent, are essentially time machines. He had all kinds of, theories about what this could be. But for me, the evidence, the totality of the evidence is undeniable that this mystery is genuine and real.
I mean, for the longest time, we've doctored our history to suit our needs. And I think the more you research this topic, and ancient Egypt and ancient aliens is another great history show, no matter what you believe, it makes you question our history and like who's writing this and who's making us I mean, because we also used to be a lot more in touch with the cosmos and spirituality, I suppose, than we are now. We're completely out of touch, and it makes you wonder if our former selves back then knew something about this, and it seems like they did, based on cave paintings, based on hieroglyphics. A lot of stuff points to there being these questions asked since we can remember, you know. So it's hard for me to look at all that stuff and go, nah, that's not true. I've read my government 101 book. You know what I mean? Like, it's too weird to disregard, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be ignorant to dismiss everything and say no. I don't know how people could say that. And that is something our show really explores, and they explore it beautifully with Alan Hynek. He is the perfect example of like this man who wasn't, you know, the typical flying saucer enthusiast of the 1950s. He was really a very intelligent, credible, brilliant astrophysicist who was brought in to investigate, and he was meticulous and came at it from a scientific point of view. And regardless of what side of the fence you're on as a viewer, whether you believe or not, you can go on this journey with him as he starts to think that there is something to this.
So I know we haven't launched the season and had like fan reactions, but I'm guessing with this type of material, y'all are gonna unearth a whole new type of fan that looks up these cases, that follows along the story. That's got to be something surreal.
It is, and that's really my hope, though, as well, because I do think, you know, half the American public, or maybe half the world, believes in UFOs, and half of them don't, or at least aren't sure, right? And that is totally okay. And you hit it on the head. Like, I actually really welcome the skeptical viewer as much as I welcome those who are already deeply interested in this subject matter, because at the end of the day, with this show, what I know I always wanted was that people could, after the episode, be like, no, and they could go then Google the case and be like, oh my God, like this really did happen, you know, like, and that these people really were real, and that the primary people, the first director of Project Blue Book and the chief scientific advisor on Project Blue Book, completely shifted sides, right? And kind of did not run the company Air Force line at the time, which was that these are all explainable, and came out vocally against it. And so all those things are undisputed by the very people who lived through it. And so my hope, is that people go down the rabbit hole and, you know, listen, and there are elements and aspects that we dramatize, but the heart and the soul of the mystery that happens then is what happens on the show.
How much freedom did you have in creating this world from network perspective and people looking at it as a whole? Like, I don't know if we've seen anything somewhat. I mean, X-Files is a category, but
right.
That's all from, you know, Vince and those guys' minds,
right?
Chris's mind. Like, this is based in reality, but you guys are giving us.
Yeah.
You could go anywhere with this.
Well, what's great is, you know, it's already a subject matter that history has looked at in some ways, and they have vast archives of material from documentaries that they've done. Of course, Ancient Aliens, which kind of really looks at, like, you know, going all the way back to the dawn of humanity, you know, people have seen things in the skies that they can't explain and have tried to quantify. The network was so supportive of this idea, especially because they knew that it was really important to us that we do it in a grounded way, in a way that that would, you know, every week we toe the line. You know, there is the rational explanation of what it could be, and then there's the truly mysterious explanation of what it might be, right? And we do build as we go along with our mystery, and we do take, you know, we're as inspired by sort of grounded UFO theories as we are by grounded UFO cases. And so we definitely lean into some of that stuff as well, just because it's so fascinating and interesting. But what's great about history is, like, you know, we are backed by a brand and by a network where historical accuracy and authenticity is something that they cherish and something that so it was very clear, like, kind of, and it was in line with what the vision of the show was anyway, that we use benchmarks in history as our beacons through the storytelling, and truth is stranger than fiction. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's so great about this. Like, the high strangeness of UFO cases, reports, things, just weird details that you're like, that's so great, but so strange. Those are the things we tried to, like, put into the show as well, and really let history guide us in our storytelling. And we're fortunate to have that to help guide us.
As far as your approach as actors, was this different, similar to what you guys done in the past, because it is so based in truth and reality?
I've played real life people before. And the great thing about it is that you just have a trough of information to draw from, to pick and choose what's relevant to the project. The cool thing for me in this was learning Air Force etiquette, nonverbals, codes of conduct, chain of command, all that stuff. And a lot of my performance started from that physicality. I got a real sense of who this guy was and what he was doing, but I wanted to find out a way to physically inhabit an Air Force man, who'd fought in the war and seen lots of stuff. I often start from a physical approach in a way and then dive in deeper. But I don't describe to any particular method. I just do the malarkey method. Figure it out as I go along.
Yeah, me too, man. I just before I write any pages, I just do I just think, what would malarkey do, and just do a bunch of sit-ups and push-ups. Then I'm ready to write. Cool. Yeah.
I love that. I think for me, I thought this project was really interesting, especially starting off, because we had the luxury of having both Joel and Paul Hynek, the sons of the Hyneks, as consulting producers on our show. Very bizarre when your children are older than you. But yeah, they were very helpful and generous with their time and their stories and sharing photos of their family, and also obviously for you with the cases, which was great. And they introduced me to their sister Roxanne, who had a different point of view of their mom, like when she was younger. I think there's a 16-year age gap between her and Paul, so that was very helpful in a woman's perspective. So all those things made it very interesting and inspiring. Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I was blown away by the first episode. I'm scratching and trying to hope that Tanya will let us watch more and more. But yeah, I think you guys have made something really special. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.